Hey, it's Cody. This video is inspired by my inability to make a decision on picking 5 decks to show for the 54321 tarot tag that I've been tagged in a couple times. So I thought maybe I would pick my 5 oldest decks to show. But then I realized that could be a bigger discussion than just showing 5 decks. So I decided to actually make it its own video. I have here my 5 oldest decks. If anyone wants to, tag me in showing their oldest decks, I think that would be a really cool thing to see. So yeah, I have my 5 oldest decks here, and I also have a couple of honorable mentions. So the first thing that I have to admit to you is I was 12 in 1999. And I'm sorry if that makes anyone feel weird, but yeah. So that was the first time that I got my hands on a tarot deck. It was a friend who had stolen her mother's, some iteration of the Rider-Waite-Smith, and brought it to school. So she brought it for a few days, and we would be glued to the little white book and the keywords in there and stuff, doing readings and things. And eventually she was like, "Do you want to just keep this deck?" I was like, "Isn't it your mom's?" And she said, "Well, no." She said that I could have it. Okay. I think it was less than 3 months, probably more like 2, before eventually she was like, "Yeah, my mom wants her deck back." She didn't give it to me. So I mean, I knew that was not the kind of thing that was, I knew that was going to happen at some point. But the point was, that's really where it started. So it occurred to me that the little white book was just keywords. At some point, somehow I had discovered, before the internet was really a thing. I'm sure some people had internet in 1999, but I'll tell you right now, it sure as fuck was not me. So I had found out, though, that tarot cards actually mean a lot. There are layers to the meanings. And so I went to a metaphysical shop in my town. My mother and grandmother were actually very supportive of taking me to these places. And these places were not like metaphysical shops are now. They weren't brightly lit, friendly, easy to find, comfortable, welcoming places to be. It almost, the closest one that I could find was in the city next to mine, and there's this guy, and he was always there. I don't think he ever showered. He had this cat box literally right next to the register, and he always made it feel very uncomfortable, as in I really had no business being there, which fuck you, old man. But also it led me to kind of feel weird about going there. Yeah, that's beside the point. The point really is that I did find this book, and I bought this. This is, by the time I was getting this book, it was probably 2000. I'm looking for the date. When was this? I think it was the 90s. 1996. Copyright. So this was how I read cards in my head. So basically, before I knew that bibliomancy was a thing, when I no longer had a deck, I would just flip through this and pick a page. I was like, "Oh look, I got the Empress," or you know what I mean. So basically, that's just what I invented by myself, sitting there in my bedroom with this book to read the cards. I had wild and luxurious dreams of getting a deck at some point and doing these big massive spreads in the back, and I just thought it was going to be so magical and cool. So I graduated high school in 2006. My first tarot deck that I actually purchased for myself was, I don't know, where did it just go? Oh, this. I don't have the box for it anymore. This is the Tarot of the Secret Garden, I believe. And I will tell you right now, this artwork is very different than Tarot of the Secret Forest. I'm sorry, I just remembered that it's not Secret Garden, Secret Forest. The artwork in this deck is very different, actually, than a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Like, this is the Two of Wands. That's just not... The meanings, I think, align pretty well, but as, you know, I was like 18 or 19. What year did this deck come out? Oh, it came out in 2005. I didn't get it until at least 2006 when I graduated, and this deck went right over my head. I was like, what in fuck is this? So instead I was glued to the guidebook. Once again, feeling like that tarot book that I had was not helping me with this. I mean, it would have, but so my mindset at that point was like, this is not right. While I love the artwork and things, it like actually caused me anxiety to use it, even though I force myself every day to go ahead and draw a card because I was like, man, this shit is over my head. So you may have noticed, let's see if we can find one that's easier to see. Instead of having like card backs, uniform card backs, these have black and white like drawings of the front of the card. Well, I say the front of the card, but really like there kind of isn't a front, because you can shuffle them like this and use them for like, you know, dark versus light, or reading them like almost in a reversed versus upright way, or, you know, negative or positive meanings. So that really fucked me up, because I was like, what in fuck is all of this? So I did read with this for a while. I mean, exclusively. Sorry. That is the UPS truck, and my dog hates the UPS guy. So while I have grown to love this deck so much, at the time it was a crisis. So yes, this is Tarot of the Secret Forest, not Tarot of the Secret Garden. That might be a thing, and I don't want you to think that that's what it was. Okay, so this was my first tarot deck. Okay, so while I had kind of been struggling with that, I was like, well, was kind of into like fairies. And so that's when I found a copy of Brian Froud's Fairies Oracle. This was published in 2000. Again, I didn't get it until after I'd graduated high school. It was probably 2007 or maybe early 2008. This deck, I love. I still use this deck on a regular basis. I really do recommend it. This is the Brian Froud fairy deck that is still in print. The other one is Heart of Fairy, I think. Honestly, I have no interest in that one. It doesn't look like it has like the right amount of grit or something to it. This, I have found other fairy decks since I've had this one. I don't really like these, like light pattern cards. I colored these edges as well. I don't really feel like any of the other fairy decks that I've tried to use had the same almost connection to something other that this one has. I don't know if it's because this was the first one that I had, or if it's simply because this deck is different that way. But this deck I felt really good about using. I felt like I understood the cards. Something about the massive like structure of the tarot at this point sort of alarmed me, whereas the Oracle deck I understood was not the same, like, it did not have that rigidity, really. So, yeah. I love this deck. At the time, I love it still. And this, I think, was one of my best deck purchases that I made. So, alright. My next deck that I got, this deck came out in 2008, and this is Patrick Valenza's Deviant Moon Tarot. This one I trimmed with scissors, done horribly. I also edged it with a Sharpie, so shout out to myself that did that to a first edition fucking copy of this deck, but it's this deck was fundamental to me learning about the tarot. Like, this was my deck. Like, I can still read with this deck in a way that other decks just don't measure up to, and I don't know how else to explain that. This was the deck, okay, the most influential piece of, like, tarot writing for me is the fucking little white book that came with this. This deck, or this descriptions of these cards, I know that some people complain that they skew negative. I think that's actually what drew me to it, what makes me feel like I get it. Something about this deck doesn't take itself too seriously the way that I felt like others had. Having the little white book that sort of described each card in like a sentence or two, rather than just being a list of keywords, like the Tarot of the Secret Forest was, really, I don't know, solidified things to me. I felt like I understood like how the drawings correlated, like the artwork correlated with the meaning of the card in a way that I hadn't really connected with the Rider-Waite-Smith before. It's just, I don't know. This deck, I have to thank for what, has become one of my main things, like one of the main things about me. And this deck is the one that did it. It presented it to me in a way that wasn't quite so serious. Something about it, just, I don't know. I feel like ultimately it was Patrick Valenza's like writing voice in here that made me feel comfortable that these things are somewhat flexible. By this time I had discovered, that is just one, books in the library and things about tarot that very much made it feel inflexible. A lot of Kabbalah stuff, astrology stuff, just all the things that have gotten attached to tarot cards, and I felt like there was a way to like read them wrong, and I feel like this deck sort of gave me the permission to be like, it's not quite that way. I mean, I'm sure some people practice it like that, but for me, I allow much looser interpretations in my readings. And yeah, this deck was so, it was pivotal, honestly, when I was kind of starting to feel like, I don't know. I don't know. I love this deck. I love the artwork. I love just the feeling, the personality of it. This is one of my favorite cards, and it's simply because I love, like, the little piggy tail wrapped around this stool leg right there. Like, I don't know. Okay, so, yes. I remember I had gone to the crusty old metaphysical shop and asked if they had this deck, and the guy looked at me like I was a fucking idiot, but he always did that. So I insisted that I knew this deck existed, and he got online and ordered it in for me. Man, I was so excited to go in there, and after he treated me like, no, we don't carry that deck. I did notice that he did also order a couple other copies that were on his fucking shelf, so fuck you, old man, again. Okay, so I have to say, at some point in here, I don't exactly remember when, I got a deck called the Crystal Visions Tarot. I vividly remember trying to make myself like it. It's just not my art style, but I was into the fact that it was purple. Also, I just realized I have the Aquarian Tarot. Aquarius? Fuck, I forgot what it's called. But, what was that one? 70s or 80s or something. I did have that one. I got that one around that time too, but it just wasn't the right, it was too much white. I don't know, it wasn't saturated enough in color, which is kind of a weird thing for me to be saying, but anyway, I didn't grab that one. The point is, Crystal Visions, I did give to a friend. Oh my god, dog. Here goes the dog again. Sorry. I did give the Crystal Visions Tarot to a friend who still has it and uses it, so yeah, I feel perfectly fine that that is gone. Alright, so now I have two more decks. Okay, the first one is the Wildwood Tarot. This was published in 2011. Now, I did get this one shortly after it came out. I don't know if it was 2011 or maybe early 2012. No, it had to have been 2011. Okay, so this is the Wildwood that I trimmed myself. I did a lot more careful job on this one than I had done to my Deviant Moon. Still kind of looks like shit. This deck, while I was finally starting to feel more comfortable with reading, I had struggled with the Tarot of the Secret Forest, but I felt like I kind of hit my stride with Deviant Moon, and the Brian Froud's Fairies Oracle. Then I got this one because I was into like the foresty vibes of it. I'll tell you right now, I was not ready for the amount of depth that this deck has. If it had just been like the cards in a little white book, I would have been fine. But if you've read the the Wildwood, the Wildwood Tarot's guidebook, it's like one of those big, large ones, and it refers a lot to like Celtic deities and druidic practices and things like that at that time I really didn't know shit about. I was like, I do not know nearly enough to be able to read with this deck. Like, I remember trying really hard to connect with this deck, and it's just one of those things I was not ready for at that point. In fact, yeah, never mind that. I remember there's a part in the guidebook where it has a way for you to lay out the major arcana, and I think some of the court cards, maybe? I don't know, I could be wrong. But there's a whole circle where you lay it out in, like, the Wheel of the Year. And I remember doing that, because I'm like, if I see the card sitting there like that, maybe I will understand this better. And it did not. In fact, I felt, like, deflated as I sat it out. And I was like, I do not know what the fuck this means. Now I do. And this deck and I are quite close, actually. It's not one of my most used decks. But it's certainly not one that I don't use. I feel like I tend to pull this out in, like, the summer. Oh my god. So, yeah. This was the Wildwood. I did struggle with it. But we have since made amends. Alright, here is the last deck. In 2012, an independently published deck came out. This is Kim Cran's The Wild Unknown Tarot. Now, this is a first edition copy. No, you can't have it, because I like to keep it around so that I can feel bad about it and myself. I also ended up buying the separate guidebook. And I will say, I have not the best, not even just my relationship with this deck, but also the way that I just feel about its existence. I feel like I kind of resent the way that it's always talked about as so influential in, like, the tarot world. I feel like its influence was, I guess you can look at it, its influence was more that the aesthetics allowed a wider audience maybe to feel comfortable using a tarot deck. But really, that's as far as it went. At the time, I felt like, and I don't want to be like, I'm not trying to, like, gatekeep or anything, but the shallowness of this deck, like, this shit almost broke me, man. I got this deck at a very bad time in my life, and I was like, I've got to do something. So I coughed up all the money for this and its damn guidebook. And I feel like around this time it had just occurred to me that there were, like, people on YouTube talking about tarot decks and witchcraft and things like that, which was fucking mind-blowing. And everyone and their fucking mom had this deck. So I'm like, surely there's something, like, I don't like colors. I mean, I like colors, but I don't like, I don't know, man, the highly chromatic, or whatever the fuck it's called. I don't like bright colors. I don't like intense colors. So this was a weird deck for me to get. And originally, I don't know what it does now, but it didn't come with, like, an actual guidebook. It came with this little fold-out paper that just has, like, keywords. And also the keywords were worse than, like, the little white books for, like, Rider-Waite-Smith kind of decks, or, like, the Tarot of the Secret Forest or something like that. And this deck was just, I had taken yoga teacher training classes around the same time that I got this deck. And somehow I sort of tied the disappointment of the two together. That the yoga teacher training was not what I thought it was going to be. There was no, like, I wanted to know about its roots. I wanted to learn about, like, the Hindu sort of undercurrents. Instead, I got there and they're like, oh, if you're Christian, you can totally do yoga. Yeah, no, there's nothing, like, religious about it. And, like, I didn't learn about really where it came from or what it was originally used for, or, like, even the fact that in the West it's been added, like, other shit has been added into it, weird, like, gymnastics, almost kinds of stuff. And like, it's just, it left me feeling actually like more alone than I had before I took it, because I was like, I was looking for something deeper. I was looking for like some sort of connection. And not only was there that, but this deck I had also gotten during that time. And I was like, man, this shit is shallow. I felt like a little kid trying to jump in a puddle, and it looks like it's probably going to be deep and fun to splash in, but it's instead just like this little tiny, like, I don't know. I'm not sure why this deck gets quite so much credit as being so influential for the tarot community when, like, literally Deviant Moon was right there. I don't know, man. It's almost a slap in the face to a lot of the other decks that were coming out around this time. So while I won't be getting rid of this deck, I also do not use this deck. I've tried to sort of separate it from like the time in which I got it, and I think that I've successfully done that. But also, I still don't like it. The guidebook is embarrassing. It's just very, I don't know, man. I feel like this really, like, spawned, well, I can't blame the deck. But I can say that a lot of, like, weird spiritual bypassing, light and love kind of shit was also prancing around with this deck. It was very much, like, the face of that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to act like there's not a reason for it, if that makes sense. So this deck actually, yeah, part of me almost wanted to put tarot away for a while. I felt like everything was disappointing. Nothing had the depth that I was hoping for. Like, nothing really dug in there. So whereas I felt like the Wildwood Tarot I was not ready for, this was like drivel. I didn't have. Ultimately, I did basically end up going right back to Deviant Moon and reading some more with that, because I'm like, I don't have to like this just because it's very popular. It's fine. So anyway, these were all of my first 5 decks that I still have. I mean, they really weren't my first 5 decks. I mean, I'm not really going to count that one that I borrowed from somebody's mom, but I will say that these decks were really the things that influenced much of my tarot reading now. My love of it, my love of tarot artwork. So yeah, if anyone is interested in, like, replying to this, and, even let me know in the comments, or, on a video or anything. I like to see people's old-ass decks. I like to see, like, where people are coming from. I just think that's fun. Also, I'm a nosy-ass bitch, so even if you don't, that's fine. If you're still here, thanks for watching. Bye.